Early indicators show the pro-democracy camp sweeping perhaps 17 of 18 district councils, which would give them a foothold on the election committee for this chief executive. Now, what position then does Carrie Lam and her cabinet find themselves in now?
Right now, it probably doesn't make any difference. But during the next election, then the 1,200 elected members get to vote, of which 117 will go to the Pandams. And we all know that we need about 600 to win. So Kerry last time had 777. So you take that away, you're down with only like 650, which is barely over the majority figure. So it will be very difficult for government to manage a win. And then I think it's more difficult is to govern right now.
Now, Hong Kong has become deeply polarized when it comes to the political situation. Can lawmakers on both sides here find common ground to chart a future for the city, perhaps reaching a political solution to the ongoing crisis?
Well, I'm from the pro-establishment camp. But I really have to say in recent years, because of the slim majority that government have, and on some of the unpopular policies they want to make, for example, the fugitive bill, the extradition bill, when so many people object, the government still decided to go ahead. We have like 1 or 2 million protesters, and they're saying that I'm going to do it anyway. So I think in the last few months, all the riot, the protesters we have seen, hopefully, I think after this election, it will go away. That's a blessing in disguise. I think you will not see the scene that we have been seeing for the last few weekends, riots at the universities or the streets and the MTR or at the airport. I really expect this to go away. People figure out if I can get back to the council and win politically, I will not, like in previous years, just vote for government, whatever government wants us to do.
With what's been happening, we have seen business sentiment come under pressure, certainly looking gloomy, that picture there, pulling up a chart in our terminal to demonstrate that for our viewers. What is your assessment of how perhaps the polls, as you say, while they may not make a big difference now, how can that help boost this picture?
Well, certainly it will. Is that I think the protesters will slow down. And if the protesters doesn't urge the rioters to go the way they have been doing. So I think the disruption on the MTR, where no one can go to work, the disruption to our Cross Harbour Tunnel, that would also subside. And if that being the case, I think business could be back to normal. Our tourism will come back, our retail trade, our restaurant, everything will be for the better. And if that happens during sort of the pre-Christmas season right now, and January, which is before the Chinese New Year, then I think business community really looks forward to the stability, bringing back the prosperity part.
Your optimism is encouraging, James, but realistically, none of the protesters' demands have been met. So why, to play devil's advocate, would they stop protesting?
That's a very good question. I think the key question is on the Commission of Inquiry. I think the government now will probably have to seriously think about it. Government has also been saying that if the riot and protest dies down, then we will conduct or we will consider conducting this Commission of Inquiry. And I really think that the protesters or the violent protesters or rioters that have been happening in the last few months, that will die down. And by then, in January, government will have no excuse not to have the Commission of Inquiry. And if that's the key demand that the people wants, I think that will achieve part of it. Now, the second part about the democratic universal suffrage, I think government have really to think twice about this. Because right now, government does not have a majority at the district council. It used to be out of the 450 seats, 300 pro-government, 150 on the opposition side. Now it's the reverse. Now I think today's latest count is the Pan-Democrats, the opposition, got like 350 seats. And the pro-establishment side only got about 100. And if that goes into next year's September legislative election, that's where it really counts. If we lose the majority of the 70 seats in the Legislative Council, then government simply cannot govern.
Yes, and where does this leave Carrie Lam, the chief executive? Because you called for her resignation back in October. How do you see her position now, heading into those LegCo elections next year?
I think it will be even weaker. If you look on the current election last night, most of the candidates that lost, it's not because they did not do a good job in their district. It's simply because they supported the government on the extradition bill and against the Commission of Inquiry blindfoldedly. They're saying no is no. They couldn't even give a reason. So when they were queried on the street by the voters, they actually have nothing to say. And I think this is also a good trend to tell Beijing that the Hong Kong people have finally sort of waken up to the sense that one country, two system, high degree of autonomy, the two system is sort of wakening up, that if 70% of our voters voted, that's like double. In the past, in the district council, the voting rate is about 35 to 40%. This time, over 70% voted, and more than 70% voted for the Pan-Democrats, which is the opposition. So whoever that's governing, be it Carrie Lam or Beijing, who's looking towards the governance of Hong Kong, will have to have second thoughts about meeting some of the wishes or aspirations of our people, which is actually not that outrageous in a sense.
Will there be any room for compromise, do you think, when it comes to those 5 demands, if there are other political solutions that can be found? For example, the Liberal Party has put forward this idea of LegCo looking into the protests in terms of an inquiry.
Well, the LegCo looking into the protest thing is actually tougher than if government does the thing themselves, because the Legislative Council in Hong Kong is similar to your Senate or Congress. If we could subpoena all the government officials to come and make statement, that's the power and privilege bill in the Legislative Council. It's actually more powerful than what we're asking government to do, which is conduct their own inquiry. Government so far has only been willing to let the police investigate themselves. And people saying that that's not too fair. If we want to have a thorough investigation, maybe government should set up an independent commission of inquiry headed by like a retired judge, someone with ability and the trust of the people in Hong Kong. So this is what we're looking forward. And in the past, we had set up such commission of inquiries on a lot of controversial subjects.
Is Hong Kong's judicial independence at risk?
No, not yet. This is something that we're still very happy to see. Firstly, the judges have their own sort of promotion system. So it's not the chief executive can simply appoint someone, or Beijing can simply say that I want who to be the chief judge, and therefore you rule the case. For example, recently our High Court just ruled the mass law unconstitutional. Well, certainly they're not taking the view similar to the administrative or the executive branch, nor the wishes of Beijing. So I think our good thing is that right now, up to now, the judicial independence is still 100% here. Now, 30 years down the road by 2047, certainly no one can tell. And this is one aspect where a lot of people is actually worried about, to make sure that the judicial system doesn't get eroded year after year.
Yes, but that disclaimer that you made there up till now, that is a critical one. As you point out, the High Court exercised its judicial independence, overturned the face mask ban, but I think perhaps what Sophie was getting to, the point she was getting to, was that China then questioned that decision by the court. Do you find that a little concerning?
Well, the Hong Kong High Court is not actually questioning the mass law. They're questioning that the way you use it, because government did not pass this law via the Legislative Council. Normally, like your Senate or your Congress, you have to pass the law through the Congress. But this time, government did it with executive power, which we don't think is the right way. And the High Court is saying that unless you use the state of emergency power in that law, if you simply say that Hong Kong is not in a state of emergency, you should not use that emergency action, which is just by executive passing that law. So I think government really have to think twice about that. But of course, China will have the ultimate say through the MPC Standing Committee. If they give an interpretation of the law saying that this is not contravening the basic law, then it's a different issue. But that probably will have to wait for the next step.